At this stage, the apple was already recognizable, but it still looked flat. The problem came down to 5 common mistakes. I'll fix each one and show you how the same drawing becomes three-dimensional. I'm drawing from a photo I took myself. The setup is simple: one apple, one light source, and a plain background. I'm using an HB, a 2B, a 4B, a kneaded eraser, and a blending tool. You don't need a large pencil set for this. Before I start drawing, I look for the largest relationships. I compare the height and width, the slight angle of the apple, and the direction of the cast shadow. Removing the color for a moment makes the light and dark areas much easier to see. I'm not drawing a perfect apple from memory. I'm drawing the uneven shape of this specific apple. I begin by marking the overall height and width. Then I compare the left side with the right instead of trying to make them perfectly symmetrical. Those small differences make the drawing look like this apple, not a generic symbol. I keep the outline very light because it is only a guide. It should not become a dark border around the finished drawing. I'm also marking the cast shadow now so the apple and the surface are blend together. At this point, the apple is recognizable, but it still looks flat. And that is completely normal at this stage. The basic shape is there, but the light, shadow, edges, and contrast are not fully developed yet. Now let's look at the 5 problems that are holding it back. Mistake number 1 is using a value range that is too narrow. Most of the apple is sitting inside the same middle gray. Without a clear difference between the light side and the shadow side, the form cannot look round. So I'm separating the large value groups before adding any texture. I build the darker side with several light layers instead of pressing hard immediately. Mistake number 2 is treating the shadow side as one flat patch of gray. The value needs to change as the surface turns away from the light. I make the transition gradual instead of dividing the apple into 2 hard halves. Near the lower edge, the value changes again because some light is bouncing back from the table. I keep comparing the drawing with the reference and build the form slowly. Mistake number 3 is making the cast shadow too weak. The darkest area is directly underneath the apple, where very little light can enter. As the shadow moves away from the object, it becomes softer and lighter. That small contact shadow connects the apple to the table. Without it, the object feels like it is floating. Mistake number 4 is giving every edge the same strength. A real object is not surrounded by one equally dark outline. Some edges are sharp because the contact is stronger. Some are soft because the surface turns gradually. And some almost disappear when the apple and the background have similar values. Instead of drawing a border, I create the edge through the difference between the object and the space around it. Mistake number 5 is using too little contrast, or placing it in the wrong areas. There is some reflected light near the lower edge, but it still belongs to the shadow side. I lift it gently and keep it darker than the main light. Then I straighten the deepest darks underneath the apple. Inside the top indentations and around the stem. I save the brightest highlight for the end, when I can judge it against the completed value range. Now that the 5 main problems are fixed, I can add the texture. The marks follow the curve of the apple instead of sitting on the surface like a flat pattern. I'm not trying to copy every spot from the photograph. A few carefully placed details are enough to suggest the skin. The less important areas can remain simple. Once those relationships were corrected, the apple started to feel solid. The final drawing has more detail, but detail is not what made it feel realistic. The biggest change came from fixing 5 problems: a narrow value range, a flat form shadow, a weak cast shadow, edges that all look the same, and contrast that was too weak or placed in the wrong areas. These 5 ideas can be used on almost any subject. Which surfaces gives you the most trouble? Glass, metal, fur, skin, fabric, or something else? Leave your answer in the comments. I'm using your ideas to decide what I should draw and test on this channel.